Chapter 1. I come to Lilliput. My father lived in the north of England, but he was not very rich. I was the youngest of 5 brothers. I left school when I was 17 years old. My father could not pay for me after that. I traveled on the ship Antelope to the South Seas. We left Bristol in May 1699. I will not write down everything about our journey on those seas, but I will tell you this. On our way to the East Indies, a great wind carried us the wrong way. 12 of our men died from the hard work and bad food, and the other men were not very strong. One morning there was heavy rain and we could not see well. In the strong winds, the ship hit something in the water and broke. 6 of us got a boat into the sea, but we were weak and the wind turned it over. We fell into the water. The wind and the water carried me away from the other men, and I never saw them again. "I'm going to die," I cried loudly. But then I put my feet down. I could stand. The wind was weaker now. I walked for more than a kilometer through the water and came to an island. It was after 7 at night. I traveled another half a kilometer, but there were no houses or people. Perhaps I could not see them because I was very tired. Then I sat on the ground and slept the best sleep of my life. I woke up after about 9 hours. It was daylight and I was on my back. I tried to stand up, but I could not move. I turned my head a little and looked round me. I saw thousands of strings across my body. They were everywhere, round my arms, my feet, and through my long hair. I could only stay there on my back and look up at the sky. The sun was hot and the light hurt my eyes. I heard noises next to me, but I could see nothing. Then something moved on my foot. It moved over my body and up to my face. I looked down and I saw a man. He was smaller than my hand. 40 more little men followed him. I cried loudly and they were afraid. They all ran away and jumped onto the ground. Some were hurt, they told me later. They came back and one man walked near my face. He threw up his hands and looked up at me. He called, "Hekina Daigle." And the other men answered, "Hekina? Daigle Hekina?" I could not understand their language. I pulled very hard and I got one arm up from the ground. I tried to look at this man again. It hurt because it pulled some hair out of my head. I put out my hand and tried to catch some little men, but they ran away. Then I heard a noise, and something hurt my hand. 1,000 small swords, I thought. I looked down. They were arrows. Some arrows went into my clothes and I could not feel them, but other arrows went high into the sky and came down on my face. They hurt me, and I was afraid for my eyes. I put my hand over my face. I'll stay quiet, I thought. Then I can break the strings tonight. These people can't hurt me very much. They're too small. So I stayed quiet and waited. No more arrows came from the little men, but their noise got louder and louder. There are more people here now, I thought. I heard a sound near my ear. I turned my head to the noise and saw men next to me. They're building something from wood, I thought. It's a table. Now there are 4 men on top of it. I understand they want to talk to me. One of the men on the table was older and larger than the other 3. He wore a beautiful coat. A little boy, his servant, carried the back of this coat above the ground. The older man called Langro Dehul San. 40 people came and cut the strings round my head. Now I could turn and see the people on the table better. Then the man in the long coat began to speak. He spoke very well, and he moved his hands up and down. I began to understand him. He spoke for a long time. Of course, his words were strange to me, but I watched his hands. "We will not hurt you," I understood. "But do not try to run away, or we will kill you." I put up my hand and showed him, "I will stay here." Then I had an idea. I also put my hand to my mouth. "I am hungry." The man understood me. He shouted to the people on the ground. 100 men climbed onto my body and walked up to my mouth. They carried food for me. It came from the king, they told me later. What food is this? I thought. They're giving me very small animals. Then I ate a lot of bread. The people watched me with wide eyes because I ate very quickly. A lot of men came with a very big cup of milk. I drank it and called for another cup. I drank the second cup and asked for a third cup. "There is no more milk in the country," they showed me with their hands. But they were happy because I ate and drank their food. They danced up and down on my body and cried, "Hikina de ghoul." After my meal, a very important person came to me. He brought a letter from the king. Servants in very fine clothes followed him. He walked up to my face and put the letter near my eyes. Then he spoke, and often turned to the northwest. Their city and their king were there, about a kilometer away, I learned later. The king wants to see me, I understood. I spoke to this man and showed him. "Take these strings off me." But he moved his head. "No, we have to carry you with the strings round you. But we will give you food and drink. We will not hurt you." I remembered their arrows. I don't want to feel them again, I thought. They can carry me. The great man went away. After that, the people made a loud noise and they shouted, "Peplum Ceylon!" Then they came to my head and cut the other strings. Now I could turn my head more than before. I was happy about that. I began to feel very tired, and I slept for about 9 hours. There was something in my food, they told me later. The people brought some wood and pulled me onto it. 900 men worked for 3 hours before I was on the wood. I was asleep. 1,500 of the king's largest horses arrived. After 4 hours, we began our journey. The horses pulled me on my wood, and we traveled for a long time. At night, we slept. 1,000 men with arrows watched me, so I stayed quiet. The next day, at daylight, we moved again. In the middle of the day, we were about 150 meters from the city. The king came out. He walked round me and looked up at me carefully. "Do not climb up onto this man's body," his men told him. "It is too dangerous." We stopped in front of an old church. This was my house now. The great north door was more than a meter high and nearly a meter wide, so I could go into it on my hands. They put a string round one of my feet and tied it to the wall of the church. I could only walk about a meter away from the outside of my door. Chapter 2. My Life in Lily. Early next day, I came out of my house and looked round me. To me, the country of Lilliput was as small as a garden. The tallest trees were about 2 meters high. I turned and looked at the city. Was this little city a picture in a child's book? Across the road from my church, about 6 meters away from me, there was a very big house. I saw people on top of it. The king was there with other men, women, and servants. They're watching me, I thought. After a time, the king came down. He got up on his horse and came nearer me. The horse was afraid of me, the man mountain. It began to jump up and down, but the king, a very good horseman, stayed on his horse. The servants ran to the animal's head and stayed with it. When he could, the king got down. He walked round me, but he never came too near. Men brought me food, and the queen and her young sons watched me from the top of the house. After a time, the king went away. A number of his men stayed and looked after me. "Some of our people want to hurt you," they showed me with their hands. I sat on the ground near the door of my house and tried to sleep. Suddenly, I felt arrows again, and one arrow nearly hit my eye. The king's men caught these bad people, 6 men, and threw them to me. I put 5 men in one hand. I took the other man and put him into my open mouth. He was very afraid, but I laughed and put the 6 men carefully on the ground again. They ran away from me as fast as they could. At this time, I slept on the floor of the church or outside on the ground, but the king said to his workmen, "Make a bed for him." So they brought 600 little beds to my house and made them into one big bed. Then the king and his great men met and discussed me. "Perhaps he is dangerous," said the first man. "We cannot untie his strings." "He eats too much food," said the second man. "The people of our country will be hungry." "Let's kill him now," said the third man. "We can do it when he is sleeping." "No," said his friend. "What can we do with his dead body? It is too big." Then a man said to the king, "Some people tried to kill this big man with their arrows, but he was kind to them. He did not hurt them." "This is good," said the king. "We will not kill him now, but we will teach him our language." They did this, and in about 3 weeks I could speak quite well. The king often came to see me and helped my teachers. We began to talk. "Please untie these strings," I asked him. "Not now," he answered. "But I will think about it. First, and do not be angry, my men will look at your things." "I'll happily show your men these things," I answered, "but I'll never hurt you or your people with them." The next day, 2 men came and walked over me. They looked inside my clothes. They made notes on everything, or my notebook, the glasses for my weak eyes, my money, and my money bag. The king called to me, "Your sword is as big as 5 men. Please give it to me. Wait, I will bring more men." 3,000 men stood round me and watched. "Pull out your sword now," shouted the king. I took my sword from under my clothes. The sun shone on it and hurt everybody's eyes. I put it on the ground, and the king's men quickly carried it away. "Now give me those other strange things," he shouted. I gave him my guns. After this, the king sent me his rules. "Follow my rules and we will untie your strings," he told me. Rules of Golbasto Momaran Evlame Gurdilo Shefa Muli Uligwe, king of Lilliput, a great man. 1. The man mountain will ask before he leaves our country. 2. He will ask before he comes into the city. 2 hours before this, everybody will go into their houses and stay there. 3. He will only walk on the roads. 4. He will walk carefully. He will not put his foot on any person or on their horses. He will not take anybody up in his hands. 5. He will help our ships and our men in the war with the people of the island of Blefuscu. 6. He will help our workmen when they build a wall round our garden. 7. We will give him food for 728 of our people. The reader will ask, why did the king use the number 1728? Well, I was as tall as 12 people from Lilliput, so my body was as large and as heavy as 12 hex 12 people from Lilliput. 12 hex 12 is 144. 1/4 or 4x 12 is 1728. This was the answer of the king's clever men. I read the rules and said to the king, I will follow them. The next day, men came and untied the strings from my leg. Now I could walk again. Chapter 3. I Make War on Blefuscu. Reldresal, a great man in Lilliput and a good friend of the king, came to my house with his servant. He wanted to speak to me. You can put me on your hand, he said. We talked for an hour. There are many problems in Lilliput, between the big enders and the little enders, he told me. The king and most people are little enders, but the people of the island of Blefuscu help the big enders here. Now there is war. Can you help us? But what is this war about? I asked. And what is a big ender? It is about eggs, answered Reldresal, and it is very important. For many years, everybody in Lilliput cut their eggs at the big end before they ate them. We were all big enders. But this king's grandfather cut his finger when he opened his egg. He was only a boy at the time, but his father, the king, made a new law. Everybody had to open their eggs at the little end. We had to be little enders. Many of the king's people were angry and opened their eggs at the big end. Some big enders left our island and started new lives in Blefuscu. The big enders hate the little enders, and the little enders hate the big enders. I went to the king the next day. I can help you in your war, I told him. The ships of Blefuscu are waiting for the right wind. Then they will come to Lilliput. They know nothing about me because I stay away from the sea. Listen, I have a plan. The king listened carefully to my words, and he was very happy with my plan. I then went to our ships and asked questions about the sea between the island of Lilliput and the island of Blefuscu. It is not more than 1.5 meters or 2 meters to the bottom of the sea. They told me I found some very strong string. Then I left my shoes on the dry ground and walked into the water. In half an hour, I came to Blefuscu and saw their ships. When they saw me, a lot of men jumped out of their ships into the water. I took my string and put it round the front of every ship. Their men sent arrows at me, and the arrows hit my hands and my face. I was afraid for my eyes, so I put on my eyeglasses. Then I pulled the 40 largest Blefuscu ships after me through the water, and so I came back to Lilliput. The king and his great men could only see the ships from Blefuscu because only my head was above the water. But when I came nearer, I called, I did this for the greatest king of Lilliput. Thank you, the king said. Will you go back to Blefuscu and bring the other ships? Then I will be king of their country. Its people can work for me and be my servants. I can kill the big enders. Then I will be king of the world. No, I won't help you with that. I said. "Don't kill those people. It's wrong." He was very angry. And from that time, some of the king's friends began to talk about me unkindly. Perhaps they'll kill me now or send me away, I thought when I heard this. About 3 weeks later, 6 important men came from Blefuscu to Lilliput. They wanted to end the war. They brought 500 other men with them, helpers, writers, and servants. The king of Lilliput listened to them. Each man spoke for hours, and then the great men of Lilliput answered, with the help of about 600 men. In the end, the men from Blefuscu and the men of Lilliput wrote their names on a paper. That ended the war between their two countries. Don't take too much from the people of Blefuscu. They'll be unhappy again, I told the king's great men, and they listened to me. So the king of Blefuscu was very happy. He sent me a letter. He wanted me to visit his country. Do you remember the rules of the king of Lilliput? The first rule said, "The man mountain will ask before he leaves the country." I knew this rule, but I thought, the king won't say no. I won't ask him. So I got ready for my journey. That night, one of the king's men, a good friend, came to my house. "It is dangerous for you now in Lilliput," he told me. "The king is afraid. Perhaps you will start another war in Blefuscu and fight us from there. His men want to hurt your eyes, then they will give you no food. You will die." I was angry, but then I thought, these people were very kind to me. They're not bad people, only stupid. I'll go to Blefuscu. I took the king's largest ship. I put my clothes and my other things in it. Then I walked through the water and pulled the ship after me. I arrived quickly at the island of Blefuscu. Near the sea, I met 2 men. "Where's your city?" I asked them. They showed me the way. There the king of Blefuscu and his queen came out and met me. They wanted me to be happy, but there was no big house for me there. I had to put my coat over me and sleep outside on the ground. Chapter 4. I come home again. 3 days later, on the northeast of the island, I saw something in the sea a long way away. Perhaps it was a boat. I walked into the water and went near it. It was a boat. The wind and water pushed it and turned it over in the water. I ran back to the city. "Can you send 20 large ships and 2,000 men?" I asked the king. "I want to bring the boat back to the beach." The king's ships came. They tied strings round the boat and pulled it nearer the island. Then I took it and turned it up the right way. It was fine. "Now I can go back to my country," I cried. "I do not want you to go," said the king. But he gave me food and men. The men helped me, and after 2 or 3 days I was ready. I took 6 animals with me because I wanted to show them in my country. I wanted to take some little people too, but they were afraid. I left the island of Blefuscu on 1st May 1702. On my 3rd day at sea, I saw a ship. I called to her, but nobody answered. Then the ship came nearer and her men saw me. It was an English ship. I was very happy to see it. I carried my things onto it. I put the 6 animals in my hat. One man on the ship was an old friend, Peter Williams. He told the other men my name, and everybody was very kind to me. "Where are you traveling from?" they asked. I talked about my journeys, and they said, "These things can't be true. You're ill from your travels. So I brought out the little animals and showed the men on the ship. Everybody looked at them with wide eyes. "Your story is true," they laughed. I will not tell the reader about that journey because nothing really happened. One of my animals died, but I sold the other animals in England for a lot of money. Chapter 5. I come to Brobdingnag. I was rich after my journey to Lilliput, and I bought a house in England. I'll live here quietly and be happy, I thought. But I could not stay there. I went to sea again. We traveled to the Indies. We bought and sold things there. Near the Molucca Islands, a great wind caught us. Day after day it carried our ship to the east. We had food on the ship, but after weeks in that angry wind, we had no clean water. Then the wind died, and one of the seamen shouted. In front of us we saw a strange country. Men left the ship in one of the boats, and I went with them. We looked for water, but we could not find a river. We walked for a long time. I went south, but there was no water. So I went back to the boat. But the boat was not there. It was on the sea, a long way away, and the other men were in it. The boat moved very fast through the water. I opened my mouth because I wanted to shout to them. Then I stopped when I saw a very big man near their boat. The sea was only halfway up his legs. I turned and ran away to the mountains. I was afraid for my life. After a time, I found a very wide road through some trees. I walked on it and looked round me. These aren't trees, I thought. It's corn, about 12 meters high, I think. And this isn't a road. It's a way through the corn. I heard a loud noise and I was afraid again. Suddenly, I saw 7 big men next to me. "They're cutting the corn," I cried. "They'll cut me too, and I'll die here away from my dear wife and children." A man heard me and looked round. Then this big man saw me in the corn. He walked to me and I began to shout loudly, "His foot is going to kill me." The man stopped. For a minute, he looked down at me carefully. We look at a small animal in the same way and think, will it hurt me? Then he took me up in his fingers and put me about 3 meters from his eyes. I was about 20 meters from the ground, so I was afraid. Perhaps he'll throw me down onto the ground and put his foot on me, I thought. In our country, we sometimes do that to animals. I put my hands up. I wanted to say, "Please don't kill me. And your fingers are hurting me." He understood. The man turned up the bottom of his coat and put me in there. Then he carried me to the farmer and put me back on the ground. I spoke to the farmer. He put me next to his ear, about 2 meters away. But he could not understand me. He answered me, and the noise was as loud as a lot of big guns. I could not understand his words. The farmer carried me carefully to his house. It was time for the midday meal. His wife cried loudly when she saw me. Women in England do this when they see a rat. Then she began to like me. She cut up some bread and meat for me. I smiled. "Thank you," and took out my knife. Then I began to eat quickly. The people round the table, the farmer and his wife, 3 children, and the farmer's old mother, watched happily. A cat jumped onto the table and looked down at me. I won't be afraid, I thought. then this cat won't hurt me. I walked past the cat 3 or 4 times, and in the end she was afraid of me. But then a worse thing happened to me. The farmer and his wife had a baby, and they showed me to this child. He pulled my body and put my head into his open mouth. Then he threw me down on the floor. I was now very tired. The farmer's wife took me to her room and put me on her bed. I slept for about 2 hours, in my clothes and with my sword. When I woke, I looked round me. The room was very big, about 100 meters wide and 60 meters high, and the bed was nearly 20 meters wide and about 8 meters from the floor. Suddenly, I sat up, afraid. 2 rats were on the bed. They wanted some meat, me. One rat came near me, and I pulled out my sword. The 2 animals were not afraid. One rat tried to eat my arm, and I cut its stomach with my sword. It died. I could not kill the other rat, but I cut its back. The farmer's daughter helped me. She was about 9 years old and about 12 meters high. But in other ways, she was not different from an English girl of the same age. She played with a small house in her bedroom, and I slept in the little house away from the rats and other animals. The farmer's daughter was also my teacher. I showed her things and she told me the words for them. So, in 1 or 2 days, I could ask for everything. She called me Grildrig. Then her family used that name. And later, everybody in their country, Brobdingnag, called me Grildrig. It means a very small man. The girl looked after me every minute of every day and night. I called her my Glumdal Klitsch, my little helper. But in the end, I made her very unhappy. People in the villages near the farmer heard about me and discussed me. "This animal," they said, "is only as big as a splachnook." This was an animal in their country under 2 meters long, but in other ways it is not different from a very small man. It speaks its language and it is learning our words. It walks on 2 legs, but its legs are very small and weak. It wears clothes, and it has a very small sword. The head man of a village came to the farmer's house because he wanted to see me. I stood on the table and spoke to him. Then the visitor talked to the farmer about me for a long time. Glumdalclitch listened, but she was more and more unhappy. Later, she cried and told me, "They have a plan. They want to show you to the people of our town when they sell the corn there. Some people will put you in their hands. Perhaps they will hurt you when they do this. My father will make money, but I will try to stop him." But she could not stop her father. One day he took me to the nearest town. His workman made a box for me with a little door in it. He carried me in this on his horse, and his daughter sat behind him. I had a very bad journey. The horse moved up and down as quickly as a ship in an angry wind. The town was only 40 kilometers away, about half an hour's journey. But I was tired when I arrived. Then the farmer found a room and showed me on a table to about 30 people every time. Glumdalclitch stood on a chair next to the table and helped me. She asked me questions. I knew the answers now. "What is your name?" she asked in the language of Brobdingnag. "My name," I said in the same language, "is Lemuel Gulliver." I had to shout, "Where do you come from?" "I come from England." "Why are you very small?" "I am not small. I am as big as the other men in England. You and your people are very, very big." The people laughed then. The loud noise hurt my ears and made me ill. Then I had to walk on the table and drink. I pulled out my sword and showed them an English sword fight. And I had to do a lot of other things. The farmer showed me 12 times that day. After that, and after a very bad journey back to the farmer's house, I was very tired and ill. I did not get better. The farmer wanted more and more money. He began to show me every day at his farm, and people came from a long way away. Glumdalclitch cried because I was very weak. "What can I do?" she said.